Hey guys, thanks for watching Red Dirt Rods. Now today we're working on a very special project. We are working on the fuel system of my 1971 Buick GS convertible. This car is very special to me. I built my entire career around this car back from when I was in car audio and was sponsored by Rockford Fosgate and DB drag racing competition, all the way to my first articles. My very first article that I ever got into Carcraft magazine was on this car. It has been a workhorse in my shop for projects and magazine builds and all of that stuff. I've built this car numerous times, at least 3 complete builds, and been through a lot of other little bits and pieces. This is actually the first GM A body that was ever LT swapped. I got one of the first handful of LT crate motors when GM released those back in early 2015, late 2014. And I featured the build of that in my GM A body LS and LT swap book. So this car means a lot to me. I brought my kids home from the hospital in this car. It is near and dear to my heart. So it's important that this car gets taken care of. Unfortunately, it has not been driven in a number of years for several reasons, mostly related to the LT swap, because we put the LT in it, we put a 4L65 in it, and then we added a Pro Charger, and that caused a bunch of problems, so we had to put in a TCI Super Street Fighter 4L65, and we actually have a 12-bolt rear end that we're building for this car, but we haven't got it put in yet. So one of the things that we're doing is upgrading the fuel system. So a long time ago, we did a Phantom, an Aeromotive Phantom 340 in-tank pump in the stock A-body tank. And it's a great pump. I've used that in multiple LS and LT swaps. It works really well, and it works with the PWM system for LTs. But we have a Pro Charger now, so this thing is making 700 plus horsepower. So we need more fuel. That's where this guy comes in. Haven't even opened it yet. So why don't we do that real quick. So this is a dual Phantom. It's a little bit different. Much bigger than I had expected. All right, so this, whew, it's a big one. This is the dual Phantom. So this is gonna be the module. That's beefy. So this is basically your foam baffle is what this is. So this will get squished up and go inside the tank, and then we'll put there'll be a ring in here, and this drops in. Get that off. This is nice and beefy. So this will go in and sit like that, and this will bolt to the top of the tank. We already have a small Phantom in here, so we're gonna see what we can do making this fit. Hopefully it won't be too bad, but let me disassemble this. So this is your drop-in ring. So this goes inside, and then this clamshells like that. Works really well. And this is your drill guide. Now these used to be aluminum. Making these out of plastic is definitely a cheaper option because you can't really use it for much after you get done. So let's see here, and here's our pumps. Got a couple of socks. Got a little bridge piece. That's pretty neat. I wouldn't mind having an extra one of those for doing body work. That's a nice little anvil. That's pretty cool. We've got a 340. And we've got another 340. So these will bolt in here once we get the height adjusted, and we'll trim this up, and then this will go in here. So this is a pretty cool little system. We're gonna get all of this put together, and we're gonna show you how to do it for your project. All right, so here's our gas tank. This is not the original tank. This is actually an aftermarket replacement tank, and this is where we installed the original Phantom. and we've already unbolted it. We've actually had this out, but we've already unbolted it. I'm gonna show you a couple of things on what we had to do to make this work in our tank. Okay, so we've already unbolted this. Now, this is something that we had to do on this particular tank in order to get clearance for the outlet port. Let me go ahead and pull this guy out. So, this is a -8 fitting, and in order to make it actually work, I had to grind a square out of the hex. Otherwise, it doesn't clear the tank with the particular baffle that we had, or I'm sorry, gasket. It just sucked down too far, and the corrugations just didn't allow it to work well for us. It's not a big deal, doesn't affect sealing or anything like that, but it's something that you may have to do depending on your tank. This, however, it works really well. This is a Phantom 340. The cool thing is, we should be able to take all of these measurements, transfer them over to our dual system, and it'll go a lot faster. But one of the things I want to check, because I don't know the answer to this question, is it the same? It's the same. That's awesome. I thought that it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. So we don't have to do anything other than put the new larger baffle in this guy. I'm gonna go ahead and pull out the baffle. I don't know if these use the exact same size of baffle. That one seems larger for the new pump. So it seems larger than what I remember. But I installed this a number of years ago, so we're gonna find out. I'm gonna be careful because I don't want to damage this. The Phantom that we're taking out, there's nothing wrong with it. We're just upgrading to the dual, and so this thing is all reusable. Yeah, this is definitely smaller than this one. That's what I thought. So let me pull this out. Now the boot, basically the bucket on the bottom, it came off and it's stuck in here, so let me pull that guy out real quick. The bucket seems to be about the same size, but the foam is definitely a smaller diameter. Yeah, definitely a big difference. Oh yeah, that bucket is not anywhere close to the same size. So we're gonna take this, we gotta trim this down, which we do with a razor blade. Okay, so I need to cut our new baffle down. So I'm gonna use the old one, and I'm just gonna place it kind of up at the bottom, so that they're even, and I'm just gonna put a Sharpie mark on this, okay? So then I'll just trace this Sharpie line all the way across, just kind of roll it. If you're installing this for the first time, you're gonna need to cut this with a hole saw. You can find our video, I'll put a link into it right here. And you can see how we installed the original, which will have some tips and tricks on how to do all that. Luckily, for right now, we're just upgrading, so we don't need to do a new hole. Pretty even. It doesn't have to be perfect because this is taller than the tank, this particular deal, so it'll squish down some, and that'll put a little bit of pressure on it, keep it from moving around as well. So now just take a razor, and I'm gonna cut on the outside edge of this just because I want a little bit of extra height, because I want to make sure I have ample pressure on this. You don't want to cut too much because you don't want this to be moving around or flopping around. You can't put it back on. So I'm just gonna cut it clean as we can get it. You don't want to cut through all at once. Just make smaller cuts. It's taken us about 3 full revolutions to get all the way through it. Here we go, and then we've got a nice hat. See, there we go. No, that's not gonna work. Okay, so now we have to stuff this into the same hole, which is, this was tough. This is gonna be interesting, but Now is also a really good time to look inside your tank. This has been empty for a while, and I noticed that I got some mouse poops in here, so I'm gonna vac out this real quick. So we got a nice clean tank. Now, we gotta put this baffle in. In order to do this, I'm going to fold it over in half, okay? Just push down all the way, and then squish it like that. And that should fit in the hole. I might even do a little bit more and roll this. Yeah, I'm gonna roll it up, okay? Because the edges, you can get to the edge of the sheet metal here, and you don't want to cut the baffle because that's going to make it less effective. But as long as you don't cut all the way through, it's not the end of the world. But we just want it to be as good as possible. Alright, so just carefully, methodically, slowly push that on in. All right, there we go. That is in there. Now, all we need to do is position it. Okay, so we've got this in here. Now, this is the outside of it. I'm just gonna stick my hand in there and kind of push it down. All right, there we go. And then it just kind of unfolds naturally, and we're gonna use my hands to push it around, get it all the way outside. So there's this ring, I've got one already installed inside here. So we want to make sure that this is all the way around that, just like that. Okay, then once we're at the bottom, I'm just going to make sure that the bottom is fully spread out. So now I'm going to move the tank, and we're going to put together our dual Phantom pump. Okay, so now we're going to get this prepped. So I'm going to go ahead and take the sealing ring off. I'll pull the wires out of the way. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to lay this on a bench. If I can get it to stay. Now, they're mounting in the same place, using the same brackets, nothing else changes. So there's no reason that I can't just use this depth here. So I'm just gonna line this up. So the way this works is the depth of your assembled pump should be matching the exact depth of your tank. That gives you maximum pickup. And on this particular setup, going all the way to the bottom of the filter is right at 7 inches, and that's what we've got on our tank. So on this one, I'm gonna make a slight adjustment. I'm gonna run the pump just a hair lower, about 1/4 of an inch lower than what we did on our original, and that's just my own personal preference. We're within about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom of the tank. I want to go ahead and push that little extra bit. So what you can do, I've already cut this one from the original. I'm going to pretend that we're not upgrading and we're doing this from the jump. So we've measured our tank. I'll show you that real quick. So we're just going to take our measuring tape. We're going to go all the way to the bottom. Now there is a rib down here, so we're going to use the rib because the rib is the highest point in this section of the tank. There's two that go right below where our pump goes. So we're going to make sure we're sitting on that, and that is right at 7 inches, and that's what our old pump is at, and that's what we're going to use. That's the number. So we're going to take our pump top hat. This is the backbone, and we're going to go all the way to the bottom. There's a recess here. We're not using this. We're using this right here. So not the recess. We want to make sure we go off of the exact point where the backbone bolts. Put that up here. We're going to come down to exactly 7 inches, which is the bottom of this rib. In our particular case, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 ribs. Okay, and we're gonna take this over to our bandsaw and cut it. Now that we've got this cut, I'm gonna go ahead and just spray it down with some brake clean. I'm just gonna use my little cordless grinder and I'm gonna clean that up. Not necessarily a necessary step, but so on our pump, we have this little wing, and this will slide in here just like this, in between the two fuel lines. Okay, so we have our 340, and what we're gonna do is take that cap off. We're gonna go ahead and snap the filter onto one of these, because what we want this to rest on the bottom of the tank. So this needs to be at 7 inches. So we're gonna take our measuring tape, and what I'm gonna do here, mark out 7 inches on my bench. Okay. All right, so we've got our pump. We've got our pump here with the filter on it, little sock. We're gonna set this up against the bench at the 7-inch mark. And we're gonna slide this in here. And what I'm doing is I'm gonna get this sock, I want to get it positioned so that it is at the 7-inch mark on our bench, which is right there. That way, I can cut this line. So this line goes onto the cap for the pump. So I'm gonna mark this here, and you can adjust it. So I'm gonna cut it about 1/8 of an inch short so that I have a little bit of playroom in case I need to go up higher. But you can't put it back on, so don't cut off too much. So we're gonna cut each of those at this point, which on our particular tank, if I measure from here to here, is right at about 2.5 inches. All right, so this is pretty heavy hose, and it actually looks like it's could be used for airline. So I'm gonna use one of these hose cutters. It's got a diamond tip, not diamond tip, but it's got a V-tip cutter. Okay, they're spring loaded. These work really well for this kind of hose, so just slide that in there, get it lined up, and there you go. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do the other one. Okay, because we're using this system as PWM, we have to drill a 1/32 hole into each of these two plugs here. This is the relief valve inside here and here. This is the internal pressure release. So because it's PWM, you're going to probably be going over the internal regulator that's in these hats, which I think is around 80 PSI, I believe. So they suggest you're required to drill a 30-second hole in each one of these if you're using it as PWM. That's what we've got here. I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick. Be careful, because 30-second drill bit is very small and will break very easily. Woo-wee! Okay, so this goes directly into the outlet. That's what that plug is for. This allows it to bleed off, I guess. Something like that. So now that we've got that, we're going to go ahead and fog this down, get all that off. I'm going to go into these holes as well. Okay. Just to make sure that everything is clean. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the little plug off of this cap. I'm going to take the small worm clamp. You want to make sure you have it where you can get to the set screw, and then we're just going to push it into the hose here. There we go. gonna go ahead and lift that up and over. Okay. Then I'm gonna double check it for the length. That is spot on perfect right there. You need a 1/4-inch socket for the worm clamp, so we're gonna go ahead and zip this on down. And you wanna make sure, you'll notice here on this little head there, this is a little wide spot. So you wanna put this clamp to where it's just behind that. But you wanna make sure that it's also fully on the fuel line. Okay, snug that guy down. Then we're gonna flip her over. Move our wires out of the way. So then we're gonna take our little divider block, put that round side to the inside. Okay, we're gonna get this adjusted here. Okay, so what I'm doing here is you wanna make sure that the pump outlet is to the center and the rest of the body is to the facing outside of the backbone. That will give you clearance for that backbone. We're going to drop that on, and we're going to go ahead and put our other hose clamp on. Put the filter on. Orient this, then push this in. Alright. Match it up to the other one. Okay, now we want to make sure these are the same, set at the same height, and they currently are. And now I'll take this other hose clamp, start tightening that bad boy down. Snug that down. Now I'm going to take the divider and I'm going to drop that in between, just like that. And then we're going to take these two hose clamps. These two hose clamps, they'll go on this rib and probably this rib. So we're going to squeeze that together. If you wanted to on this particular tank, you could remove this next rib. Probably wouldn't hurt. I'm going to open these all the way up, and I'm just going to wrap them around. You want to make sure that the little return is not in the way. Okay, we're going to raise this all the way up and do this first one here. Go ahead and get that one started. All right, now I've got that one started. I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the other one. Okay, there we go. Now let's go on. Now we need, what size is that going to be? Nope, I'm going to say 11/32. Nope, I was right the first time. 5/16. Okay, then we just want to snug them up. Not too tight, just, nice and snug. All right, now I do want to tell you for clarification, I didn't like the way the socks were rubbing up against the bottom rib that we had left. That wasn't an issue on our original system because the pump was just slightly different, had a little bit different mount, and I didn't like the way it was on this one, so I went ahead and took them apart and redid that. So we've got that, and this is ready to go. Now, next step. The next step is to connect the wires. You're just using each side here. Okay, and these are silicone sealed, so you just push and connect. That's the module. That's all there is to it. This is ready to go in the tank. All right, and that's all there is to the general assembly of a Phantom Dual 340 fuel pump from Aeromotive. This drop-in module can support 2,000 horsepower in a carbureted, naturally aspirated application, 1,700 horsepower in an EFI naturally aspirated application, and 1,400 horsepower in a boosted EFI application. Also 1,700 horsepower in a carbureted boosted application. So this has more than enough to feed our 700 horse LT1. So we're gonna go ahead and we took it all back out and we're gonna clearance the edges because this right here is where these are catching on the edge. So we're just gonna clearance between these two holes on either side. We're gonna go ahead and drop the ring back in, just like that. Now, I would really like to see a speed nut on these to keep it from, you know, just in a couple locations to keep it from dropping down, but that's not an option at the moment. I don't have any. All right, now we'll drop our module in. Don't forget the gasket. Now, if you're not using the siphon tube, this thing drops in super easy. There we go. Now I got it starting to pull up. Get one on this one. We've got these two 180 apart. Then we can start dropping on the washers and putting on the rest of the nuts. Now, we are having to use a small, this is a 3/8 bit. And we have actually ground this down a little bit to fit in between here because none of our sockets were thin wall enough to get between this little horseshoe. So we'll do this in a crisscross pattern once we have all of these just tightened up to the washer. That's all there is to installing an Aeromotive Phantom Dual 340 pump in just about any tank. We do have to wire up each pump separately, and you also have to tie the two outlets together, which we will do under the car once we put this tank in. We're gonna throw this in here, go get something to eat, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching Red Dirt Rods. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you later. Let's make magic.